is
If it
unbearable.
makes you feel better, I have never read any of the Last Chancellor's novels either. So,
You're not missing anything, I can assure
all
you
right.
that.
So I think that was a good discussion on authors. For those of you listening, let us know who your favorite authors or least favorite authors and favorite books are in the comments. I'd love to kind of hear what people think.
Get a
So
pull
let's
start.
get into like the meaty topic. So I know we've had this discussion kind of on the side
Mm-hmm.
before at events, and specifically, I think I remember had a big conversation with you about it at the Beef and Wing, one of the years when you guys were running the Beef and Wing Brawl. And
Mm-hmm.
for those of you guys that don't know, the Beef and Wing Brawl is was a GT out in the Midwest, and basically
Northeast.
Northeast. Did I say Midwest? Isn't
Yeah, you
isn't that the
did.
Northeast? Isn't the Midwest like Northeast?
No,
Come
dude.
on.
Is it the Midwest for
What's okay?
Canada?
So what do you consider the Midwest? Like Minnesota? Okay, I don't know. That's basically
Like
Northeast, man.
middle
Come
of
on.
like
Okay, anyways,
Colorado. Like
Northeast. All right. Long story short, um, David used to paint judge all the armies at the event himself. So rather than having a rubric, or rather than having like say player's choice or player's like favorite army that people would vote on, David would actually go in with his own criteria, and I don't remember, I can't remember exactly what it is. Maybe you want to talk about it a little bit more. And he would actually literally paint
yeah.
judge himself. He'd pick up your models, he'd go through your whole army, he'd paint judge. And for me, as someone that is spends a lot of time painting, I always was like, dude, I appreciate you because I think that's a lot of work, but B, I think it's the most superior system for paint judging, which is having an impartial judge, and not just any impartial judge, but a judge that's actually good at painting. And my argument always was that um, bad. So when I look at say I look at any model painted to a standard that's either up to how well I
Mm-hmm.
can paint or less, then
Yeah.
generally I'm gonna be able to tell how that was done. But when I look at something
Yeah.
that's done by the masters, like this is like Dave Caldwell or Sergio Calvillo or any of these guys that are like painting at a level that's just like so far past me, I literally cannot discern the the difference, the time, the skill level that goes into painting painters of that caliber. I just
Yeah.
can't do it. Like
Yeah.
both of the painting blows my mind. And in that same vein,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes with player scored painting, where players would go around, they look at the armies, they'd say who's the best painted. It's the same thing except just brought way
Yeah.
back down. So now you have a player that maybe is not the best painter, in anything
Mm-hmm.
past a certain level, it's like he can't distinguish it from magic in his eyes. So for me, I've always felt that
Yeah.
player judge painting it was a terrible way to score painting because
Mm-hmm.
people don't know how to uh, people just don't know what to look for. They can't tell the difference between a wet blend, a layer, and like a wash or a dry brush. And that's not to
Yeah.
disparage them. That's just to and it
Mm-hmm.
happens to me at the level that I paint, but at every level,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's there's a certain level of ability that you're able to kind of judge, I guess. So
Yeah.
I guess the question I have is like I think I just said I think judge painting is the best painting, but what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
What about you? What do you think? And what's the ultimate solution? Because I think in a lot of competitive events, if I said, hey, go to Adepticon or LVO and judge paint, right? Do you know what they do to LVO? They're just like literally, if your army isn't like a 9 out of 10, just don't even. We don't even want to fucking see your piece of trash. We're only gonna. It's like bring
Dude.
your army up if you think that it's like semi decent, and we'll judge those ones. And it's like literally a
Yeah.
guy walking by giving you like a ribbon. So obviously, judge painting is not the answer at an LVO, but like yeah, like what are your thoughts on this whole kind of paradigm?
So this is really important because we talking about best overall. Um when I started when we started when my club started the Beef and Wing Brawl, the intent was to create a GT level event supposed to be soft score heavy. It was supposed to be like 30% painting, 30% sportsmanship, 40% battle point. That was supposed to be like the draw of our event. But granted, like as competitive 40K got more and more popular, we had to start bending it to accommodate because it's just like,
People get mad.
yeah. And honestly, it's like when you're not getting paid to do this event and you're literally losing money every single event or breaking barely even, the last thing I want to do is hear like 20 people complain about your event. I'm just like, and then going to every GT that I go to and everyone being like, hey, 6 months ago you gave me a bad paint score. Fuck you, Dave. Ha ha ha. And they're like, just kidding, but I'm pissed at you. Don't fuck it up. I'm like, all right. And then multiply by like 40 throughout the year. Once again, TOs, you guys are awesome. Taking those punches. Anyways, because of that though, there's a two-pronged thing. I agree the idea that like, I want to have like overall be like the champion of the event, but also when it comes to localized events that are smaller, I want to use the event as a springboard to improve the community. And it's not only just like bring everyone together, but also like the hobby aspect was very celebrated.
Hmm.
And I created a paint rubric to help players increase their skills and work really hard every year and leading up to it. So I released my paint rubric earlier on the year. People could look at it. And I used to go to like every single store in my
Hmm.
region and just hang out with the guys. We'd play some games, I play local tournaments, and they'd ask me like, hey, this year I want to increase my paint rubric by 3 points. What can I
Right.
show me their army? And I'll be like, hey, here's the rubric. Maybe work on your highlights this year, or maybe
Right.
you could work on weathering or
Right.
freehand. And you use the rubric as a loose base way to help prove what they're doing.
Right.
I don't think it should be law because at LVO they did that, and I was livid.
What did they do?
I think you, I think you and I were both pretty pissed actually
What did they do? Explain explain to listeners what did they
because
do?
they just like ran through this rubric and they gave me like 15 minutes. Sorry, they were like running through because there's 800 players at this last year's LVO,
Yeah.
right? 800 players.
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
mean, a gargantuan task to paint score 800 armies. Like
Right.
that's like was it Herculean effort
Hmm.
there. So they have to use a rubric and just fly through all your stuff. And they get to my army and they're like, what model is your model? What's your centerpiece model? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, which one's the better paint of all of them? I'm like, well, I paint everything to the same quality. They're like, that doesn't help me. And I'm like, I don't know, dude, this HQ character, I guess, because he's bigger. They're like, maybe you should have a knight in your list. And he walked away, and I'm like, what? And I got so confused. And then, like, day two, they did like day two paint judging.
Right.
And Jim and I walked up because we were like, oh, we didn't know if you saw our armies. They're like, what are your names? And then they were like, nah, neither of you are on there. And you and I were like, there must be a mistake. Excuse me, there must be a mistake. Can we talk to your manager, please?
Right.
But they were like, no, you're no, we don't have you. And you were just like, fuck it, I'm gonna go get drunk. And I'm like, good
Which,
idea. And
which,
then
for spoiler alert, I did very, very much so. Okay, so that actually brings up you bring up two really good points that I want to talk about. So the first thing is the whole thing of rubrics, and I don't so like I don't hate rubrics. I like rubrics to a point, as a tool to essentially
yeah,
give players a little bit of guidance on like what kinds of things a judge might use, right? Like,
yeah,
so for instance, if a rubric was released and said, here's some things that a judge will look for, highlighting, basing,
yeah,
etc. I don't mind that. I think that's fine because then it gives players an idea of the kinds of things they should make sure that they're doing, like belt buckles painted, eyes painted, these kinds of things.
yeah,
I really don't like the rubrics that require you to change how your army looks. So for instance,
yeah,
there was one that was like, I think it was Adepticon, and it was something like 50% of your army needs to be converted. Now, for you, I think that is easy because literally every model that you ever own and paint is paint converted. For me,
maybe,
I do a lot of converting as well. But
yeah,
and so as a chaos player, it's actually quite easy. But there's a lot of armies that it's not easy to do conversions, whether it's due to the models themselves. Like
yeah,
Eldar, how much conversion
oh
work
yeah,
can you really do to an Eldar army without totally scratch building models? And
yeah,
so then it feels like okay, or there'd be like, oh, like it needs to have some percent of freehand or some percent of X. And then what you're
yeah,
doing is you're saying, okay, so my army doesn't have that thing, but I'm going to
yeah,
go and add things to my army to make it so I can check a box.
yeah,
It's not because my artistic vision for my army wants me to do this. It's because
yeah,
I need to go check this arbitrary box and I want to get those points so that I can win the best overall. So in that sense, I don't like rubrics that
mm-hmm.
essentially force players into certain things. Where I
Okay,
like the rubric is in that very initial screen where it's like, is your army painted? Is it based? You know, is it like three colors, just the very very basics that almost anyone that should have any sort of chance of winning best painted will check. And then anyone
Mhm.
that like so that's why I don't like rubrics. The second point that you made, which I think is really interesting, is I don't like the idea that like like they're because of the rubric that you mentioned, like
Mhm.
I thought our armies probably deserve to be in that top showcase at LVO personally, but obviously there's subjectiveness involved there. But the thing
Yeah.
is like I don't I don't think that like whoever was judging that subjectiveness, if they're just going by some arbitrary rubric or they're just going by their, let's say, subjective style preference, like you know me, we paint very differently. I paint a very
Mhm.
bright, high saturation, clean. Like you mentioned weathering earlier. I literally have weathered 3 models out of 3,000. I don't like weathering. I like all my models to look like they just came out of the car wash and that they're just arrayed for battle, like parade, like they look great. I don't
Yeah.
like weathering. I don't like I don't like dark, desaturated, grimy colors. You like that. Like
Yeah.
you have a very kind of
Mhm.
very kind of textured, kind of realistic style with weathering, with like all these kinds of things. And like I think and I know as a painter and as someone that models, I know how much work you put into that. And so I can recognize that as someone that's
Mhm.
judging. And vice versa, I'm
Mhm.
sure you could look at my army and you wouldn't be like, well, Jim didn't do any weathering, so he put less effort in, right? No, you just say
Yeah.
his effort is in different areas. He really focused on
Yep.
his blends or his highlights. And then likewise, like there's certain things like I think I don't know if it was Depticon. It was like your army must have like banners or freehand and stuff like that. I'm like, again, there's probably certain
Out of
armies.
tierness chat.
What are you gonna do if you're playing
You know?
Tyranids? What freehand? If you have a Tyranid
Yeah.
army, where are you gonna put freehand? Like you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like there's just no opportunities for that. Like so
Yeah.
I don't like those kinds of things. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess my point is I agree with you. In my so I guess the question is like, and then player's choice. I don't mind player's choice if it's a separate award because why I like player's choice is because a really cool thematic army with like um
Mhm.
a lot of like cool conversions theme that's maybe not painted the best has an opportunity to win just based on like the rule of cool. That's why I like player's choice. But if we're gonna do best painted, or like I think that needs to be so my perfect system in here. I'm going to propose a solution because everyone's asking, Jim, you like to complain a lot, but what the fuck is a solution? So here's my perfect paint system. Okay, first there's
Whoa,
two awards.
perfect.
There's player's choice and there's best painted. Player's choice is voted on by the players, and 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 I'll get so I'll come back. I'm going to table that for a sec because player's choice has to be done whenever there's player voting, it has to be done right. And there's a big whole can of worms with player voting, but I'll come back to that. Best painted should be this. It should be a basic rubric that checks off like let's say zero like up to 20 points, and almost every army, as long as it's got like the basics, should get those 20 points. And anyone that doesn't get the 20 points is automatically kind of, and that's essentially the score that goes in your tournament score. Okay. Then for best painted, players that think that their army is at a level, and this is why I say the players, not a rubric, saying because a lot of rubrics say, oh, if you have more than 25 points, come to us, we'll put you in the showcase. I think it should just be up to the
Yeah.
players. So if you're a player and you think that your army is painted at a level that could potentially win best painted, you can just put it in. There's no questions asked. And then of those
Yeah.
armies, and here's the thing, from my experience, at every event, big or small, realistically, there's 2 or 3 armies at a GT level size event. There's maybe 2 to 3 players at a major, like 120 plus major. There's maybe 3 to 5 players, and at an LVO size event, 800 players. There's probably like 10 or 12, 10 to 15 players that think
Yeah.
that they have armies good enough to actually say that they have the best painted army. So let those players come forth, right? Come forth, right?
Yeah.
Let those players come forth. The guys that think they have really nice armies, put their armies out there, right? And then anyone that doesn't care or doesn't want to be judged, well, then they're not going to put their army forth anyway, so there's no hard feelings. Then
Yeah.
once you have that smaller list, then maybe 1 or 2 judges go through and score those armies and determine the best painted armies. Okay, so
Yeah.
and that's not based on a rubric. That's based on maybe there is some sort of like subjective criteria. Like maybe they get a
Mhm.
score on various areas. Maybe there's a way
Yeah.
that like and I would prefer that portion to actually be done by like 2 to 3 people. So it's like me and you David, let's go through and have discussions about this small set of armies,
Oh yeah.
and we can probably, as good painters, come to a probably pretty unanimous conclusion on which one we think is best painted. Maybe if there is a tie in the
Yeah.
end, I think if I'm gonna roll with you as a paint judge, and we say we come down
Hmm.
to the last two armies and we're like, okay, one of these is best painted,
Yeah.
then I think me and you objectively can say, okay, well, let's look at really closely at the blends. Let's look really closely at the belt
Yeah.
buckles. Let's look really closely at how many mistakes there are, and then
Yeah.
we can make obviously it's subjective judgment of what we think is best painted, and that should go to the best painted. So that's my
Yeah.
perfect system, right? Because it I think it checks lots of boxes.
Yeah.
It makes everyone happy. It makes sure that you're
Hmm.
not forced to change your army or add things to your army just to fill some dumb rubric. But if you have a beautiful
Yeah.
army, if it's technically flawless and you think it is, and you just think, hey, your table was at the back corner of the event, and the judges didn't, which is like think about LVO, the judges didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to see it, and now it's not in the showcase, you still can go and just put it in the showcase, right? What do you think? What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
LVO was it was really frustrating because that's what they were doing in the morning of the first day of the 40K event. They were like,
Right.
if you want your army on display, bring it over here. I got into the gaming hall after they made that announcement. So like, if you're traveling via fly, I had to build a whole new display board. It was like a modular 1 foot by one. It was like a bunch of 1 foot by 1 foot like panels that built into like a structure, and I had to use it to like fit into my suitcase. I spent like 3 weeks building this fucking display case, and I get there and I missed that announcement, and I like put my models up on the like at the table I was supposed to play at, and I'm like sitting there, and I'm like home dum dum, and everyone's like, oh dude, like did you get your army judged yet? I'm like, no, not yet. They're like, you need to go over there, and I'm like picking up like my modular like as I built it like at that spot, I like rebuild it, and the guy's like, I'm judging your army right now, and I'm like, whoa, I wish I knew, I wish I knew.
So
Like
that's
if if they gave you like if it was on the actual like agenda of like the players like packet being like 8:15 to like 9 o'clock we're doing like paint judging, I'd be like, good to know.
so
Not just like an announcement that I
I
missed. And I
think
was
you
like,
made an excellent point, David, and it goes back to this rubric shit, which is
yeah,
oftentimes you're giving points for display board, and
yeah,
I don't think beyond just having a display board, I don't think the
yeah,
display board should have any bearing on your paint score, because just as you said, you have a massive display board. If anyone's seen it, it's like fucking 2 by 2, like it's the size of like a giant Rubik's cube. It's huge. I have, oh yeah, you can see on video. If it,
in
yeah, it's
this.
huge. It's literally like you cannot put that thing on a plane, right? I also have a really nice
No,
display
you
board.
cannot.
I really have a nice display board, but when
Yeah,
I'm traveling, which is actually for most events into the U.S., it cost me when I was traveling in the 2019 season, I'd often have to um, I'd often have to check my display board, and the extra piece of, so I'd have my army case, my carry-on bag, and then maybe one more piece of luggage. So I'd have like my backpack with just like my essentials, my army case. Then I'd have to check my
yeah,
display board, and oftentimes you don't get like you pay for that. So it would cost me sometimes upwards of 180 to $100 each way just to bring a large display, like a travelable display board with me, one that I jammed in this fucking box. It'd show up all broken, like customs had ripped it open, and people in the local area would show up with like fucking lava mountain with like LEDs and strobe lights, and it's like, okay, well, if this is a display
yeah,
board competition, then I'm just gonna not care. So, but I think we
yeah.
could have a whole topic on display boards, so that's neither here nor there. Now,
We most
one thing
certainly
I wanted to
could.
talk about, and this is going out to
Mhm.
all the TOs out there, and I love you guys. And Nurgle Snurgle, thank for the follow, and or I don't know, a noise happened and I saw your name, so I don't know if you followed or subscribed, but thank you. Um, so thank you for tuning in. But here's the thing, and I want to, please, if you're a TO, please listen to me. This is really important. If you're going to have, I'm very passionate about the subject. If you're going to have any sort of player-based judging where players are responsible for judging other players' armies, there's two things you need to do. First, you need to make it mandatory that every player votes. Because at almost every event where there's this thing, there'll be 60 players,
People
and
forget.
the winning person got like 10 votes because it's the only person's friend. Second, the judging needs to all happen at a predetermined time when everyone is there, not during lunch, not in between games, not at
Or
the end
after
event,
the
not
day.
before the event.
Yeah.
There needs to be like, this is how it should go.
Yeah.
Round one, start. Okay? After round one, games are in. Okay? Round two, everyone go to their table. Okay, everyone stop. Now, go score. You have 10 minutes. Announcement. You have 10 minutes. Everyone needs to go to every table and judge the armies. Or we have all the armies that people think again, and they all need to be in one spot. So maybe before the event even starts, everyone does the army
Yeah.
judging. Because what happens at these events where there's players scored is two things. A, Jim gets put on table 90 in the back corner, and Kazka gets put on table 1 right at the front of the venue where everyone's hanging out. So I gotta go pick an army for best painted. What do I do? Well, I look around. I say, hey, that's a cool army. Okay, cool, this one. Do you think I'm actually gonna? If most players don't give a fuck about scoring other people's armies, they don't. They don't want to have to even vote. Like it's not that important to them.
Yeah.
I always find it important. I always try to do put as much effort as I can
Hmm.
into looking at everyone's armies, trying to do a fair score, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But most players, for this is why I don't even like. I think it's a dumb award to begin with because it's like most of the players just they don't give a shit. They're gonna throw away their votes. So I think there needs. So I just don't like the system in general. But if you're gonna do it, please make it mandatory and please set aside time for it to actually be done properly because what happens is once everyone's scattered across the event, people are not going to walk the entire hall to find the one army they
Yeah.
actually think is better than the other armies. They're going to find within whatever's within eyesight of the first 10 feet. Gamers are lazy, guys. Like, fucking spoiler alert, gamers are fucking lazy. Um, they're going to see the first army that catches their eye that's close by. They're going to say, oh, that one's cool. Here's
Yeah.
my score. There you
Yeah.
go. Favorite army. See you later. And then like they're not even going to go to the past 20 feet of where they're already standing. So you get the situation where, or they'll do what sometimes happens where, hey, I'm here with my clubmates. Yeah, Jim has a great army. We're all just going to vote for Jim. Or David's here. We don't even go. We're not even going to look at the other armies. We're just going to vote for David, which is also like
If you want to know a secret about the gaming club I used to be part of, they all voted against me because they like trolling me.
great.
Actually,
Well,
no, seriously, they'd be like, "Hey, by the way, Dave, I voted for that one." They actually mostly voted for you, by the way, at the what was it, the Basement Collective
it's because I'm
Open,
charming and beautiful.
the one in
I think you
Sudbury.
won that anyway, though. I
What's
think you
that?
won that anyway.
I won. I won best paint and best
Yeah,
sportsmanship at that event.
yeah. So, anyways, so that's my thoughts on judge painting. So, just to summarize, judge painting with rubric, a judge combo rubric blend is best. Player scored is trash and should
Agreed.
not be used. And
Yeah.
if you're gonna do player score, make sure it's like a secondary event award, and make sure it's done in a way that it's actually like literally if you don't vote for player for another person's army, you get zero in the tournament. You get ejected, banned for life
Also,
from the ITC.
also really important thing, if you get judges, make sure they're good painters.
Right.
That's also very
That's
important.
right.
And if you also have conversion modeling and like sculpting based things, make sure you have a judge who understands like, oh, that's a converted model, and not just someone being like, I have 4 converted models, look at them. And then it's like, no, like the guy can be like, no, you have like no converted models. Stop lying. That's like a head swap. Doesn't count.
No, but
You know what I mean?
so funny thing. In Adepticon, there's literally points for like having you have to have 50% of your army converted. So I'm like, okay, I have like 23 cultists that I've done like I've switched their like close combat weapons for an autogun because the cultist the set is like 50% close combat weapons and 50% autoguns. So like literally like 80% of my converted models were just like demon princes and then cultists with autoguns instead of close combat weapons. I'm like that one's converted and that
And
one's converted and that one's
banners.
converted
And banners,
and
dude.
banners. But I'm just like that's so lame. Like it's just like okay at that point why are you even bothering?
That depends on what depth you want to put into your conversions. I mean, if you like, want to buy Imperial Guardsmen, or like, I mean, nowadays you got the new sweet Black Fortress cultists and be like, I want to convert these, and then like hack off arms, sculpt arms, use the Vrax militia bits from Forge World. It all depends on how deep you really want to go. That's actually like a really important part of Paint Rubric to me is the the caliber of how deep you want to go and how expansive you do it per your army. Like if someone has a really beautifully painted Riptide, a Yavara, and like 3 Crisis Suit commanders that are beautifully painted, but like the rest of the army is like painted like bare minimum, and the guy next to them has the same situation, but like everything's equally painted, it's a no brainer. I'll pick that guy. Or if the guy has like all of his models like a tiny step lower than like the guy's three really good painted models, I'll pick the other guy because I look at the entire army. And Jim, I think you will agree with me on that, is that when it comes to paint judging, don't just look at the shiny big model, like a cool painted knight conversion. Look at everything that's around the feet of it.
Hmm.
Like look at everything.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people get caught up in like the razzle dazzle of like three big showcase models like strategically placed, and then they're hiding unfinished models behind
Right.
them, and
Yeah.
like
I I agree. I think you can always tell the how well an army's painted not by the coolest, best, like most biggest point model, but by the goblin, by the cultist, by the termagant. Like that's those are the models that I look at the most because
yeah,
if you look at those models and they're painted very well, then generally everything better than them is painted better. But
yeah,
oftentimes that's where people cut. People almost always put extra work into characters, put extra work into big monsters, right? But
yeah,
what we're really judging is as a whole, how's the army look? And if you look at any of my cultists, every eye is done, every belt buckle's done, every strap is highlighted three colors. Like it's like, and it sucks because I painted fucking 80 cultists because they used to be good and now they're trash. But I did it, and because and I'm proud to know that if someone walks by my army and picks up a cultist and looks at it, I feel good about it, right? I feel good
yeah.
about every model in my army that I've put on there. I know that I've put in the work. I've dotted my I's and crossed my T's. Did I get that right? I did.
Mm-hmm.
Good for me.
Go for
All
it.
right. So
I I can definitely say with some admonition
admonition.
that I've gone to events with like half painted models, and